Hi, I'm Carolyn from letstalkprayer.com. Each of these videos on prayer will contain a teaching component, and then there'll be time for you to put into practice what you've just learned. You'll be able to download all the resources you need for free from my website, www.letstalkprayer.com. So please make sure that before you start any of the videos, you've downloaded the corresponding resources. This video is part 4 in the series of how to improve your prayer life. And today we'll be looking at the importance of prayer and fasting. Because I find as I go around to churches teaching on prayer, that fasting isn't a subject taught much in many of our churches today. So I'm going to share with you the 9 reasons of why I practice prayer and fasting. The first is because Jesus assumes we will. In the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 6 verses 16 to 17, he says twice, "And when you fast," not if, when. We fast because it gives us more time to spend with God. You use the time you gain from what you give up and spend it listening to the voice of God. You think about how much time you'd have if you gave up 1 meal a day for a week, how much time you'd save. For example, you have to think about, well, what am I going to eat? You might have to go to the shops to buy some ingredients, then you cook it, eat it, then hopefully clean up. Or it could be giving up social media for a week. Wow, that can be a lot of time you get back to spend listening to the voice of God. Another reason to fast is that it helps us focus on God's voice. So often we can think, why isn't God speaking to me? But maybe the better question is, what is blocking the voice of God that I'm not able to hear what he's saying? We have constant distractions that completely surround our lives 24/7, and they can block our ability to hear the voice of God. We fast not so we can get more of God, although that often happens, but so that God can get more of us. We can hold a lot back from God, but through prayer and fasting, we are giving more of ourselves over to God. It can help you with an answer that you've been seeking, as there's a unique sensitivity that comes through prayer and fasting that helps you discern God's will. I know that there's been many times when Ian and I haven't known what God would have of us for the coming year. So we've done a fast for the first 21 days of the year to help discern God's will of where he wants us to go, of where he's leading us to. It can also be used when praying for a spiritual breakthrough. In 2 Chronicles chapter 20 verses 2 to 3, it says, "Messengers came and told Jehoshaphat, 'A vast army from Edom is marching against you from beyond the Dead Sea.' Jehoshaphat was terrified by this news and begged the Lord for guidance. He also ordered everyone in Judah to begin fasting. So people from all the towns of Judah came to Jerusalem to seek the Lord's help." And what happened? Well, you can read the rest of the chapter for yourself, but it goes on to tell us that the people didn't even need to fight. They just had to take up their positions, stand still, and watch the Lord's victory. We fast because some types of prayer ministry require prayer and fasting. For example, in Mark, when the disciples couldn't cast out the demon in the possessed boy, Jesus said that some kinds of demons will only come out with prayer and fasting. We see in both the Old and New Testaments that new seasons of God's favour and work were preceded by fasting. Now, some examples of this are Moses fasting before he received the law, Jesus fasting before the start of his earthly ministry, and Paul fasting before the start of his missionary ministry. Nehemiah in getting the walls of Jerusalem rebuilt, asked God for favour in his situation. And Nehemiah fasted for the purpose of showing that his desire and need for God's help was greater than his desire and need for food. I'll say that again, because to me this is something that's really important to get. Nehemiah fasted for the purpose of showing that his desire and need for God's help was greater than his desire and need for food. And we also fast to humble ourselves before God and to show our total submission and dependence on God's will and purpose in both our own lives and in the life of our church. That's a lot of reasons of why we can fast. And there are also many different types of fasting. For example, if you haven't fasted before, you might like to start off with a day fast, where you either have nothing for breakfast or lunch or replace it with a glass of juice, and then break your fast with just dinner at night. You can do a week fast or a 21-day fast or a fast for Lent. And Lent is the 40 days leading up to Easter, imitating Jesus, who spent 40 days fasting in the desert before the start of his earthly ministry. If I'm doing a longer fast, such as a 21-day fast or a Lenten fast, it usually comprises of two things for me to give up. Now, the first is giving up something that I love that may have become a bad habit that I've gotten into, that God wants to help me to break. For example, it could be an addiction to Facebook or social media, or my love of midnight snacking, or even binge watching Netflix. And the second is something that I just love, that I'm showing God that he's more important to me than that thing I love. I'm showing him that my dependency on him is more important than my dependency on that thing. For example, one year it was giving up half an hour of sleep, where I'd get up half an hour earlier to pray, or giving up one meal a day, because I love both my sleep and my food. Now, being brought up a very strict Baptist, it was certainly taboo to have anything to do with this Catholic Lent. So I only did my very first fast for Lent a few years ago. And I gave up Facebook, chips, chocolates, lollies, cakes, dessert, and half an hour of sleep. Now, in hindsight, that was a lot to give up for my first 40-day fast. And I wouldn't recommend that you do that because it was really hard. But in those 40 days, God worked in our family through an amazing number of circumstances. You see, our daughter Melina had stopped going to church because she was working Friday, Saturday and Sunday nights as a bartender while she completed her degree at the National Arts School. And during those 40 days of prayer and fasting, our son Bryce asked if he could have his home group at our house one night. Well, Ian and I were going out, so it didn't bother me. But I said, well, you need to check with Melina that it's okay, because I didn't want her to feel like she was being kicked out of her own home for his home group. But when we got home that night, there was a group of 12 young adults talking and praying in our lounge room, and there was Melina a part of it. They asked her to go to home group again the next week at someone else's house, which she did, and the next week again. And that home group then started praying for a job for her, where she'd be able to work days instead of weekend nights so that she could start going to church with them on a Sunday night. Now, she didn't just get any job working days. She got a job in the art industry, 2 train stops from our home. That was totally unheard of. From there, both Melina and her partner Liam started going to church on Sunday nights and became permanent members of the home group. And since that time, they went on to get married 4 days before Christmas last year. Was that Lenten fast worth it? Yes, yes, yes. But please hear me in this. I didn't set out in that Lenten fast praying for God to change our family in that way. I wasn't trying to manipulate God into doing this. I purely did that Lenten fast to be obedient to God and to show him that my dependence on him and my love for him was greater than my dependence and love on these other things that I gave up. I'm just thankful that God then chose to answer my Lenten fast in this way. If you want some good Bible plans to work through as you do a fast, a couple of good ones that I've used are from the free YouVersion Bible app that you download on your phone. The first two are for if you're doing the 21 days, and there's the 21 days of prayer and fasting by the James River Church, and 21 days of seeking him. To do a Lent devotional, the three that I've used so far are Enough, which is from Tear Fund, Lent for Everyone from NT Wright, and Lent with One Voice by the pastors of the International Churches of Hong Kong, all found in the free YouVersion Bible app on your phone. Like all the other talks we've done in this prayer series, there's a handout for you to download and work through some questions about prayer and fasting. And then may I encourage you to start this spiritual discipline. Thanks so much for joining me in this series on how to improve your prayer life. If you've used this series, I'd love to hear from you about how your prayer life has changed, or for you to share some answers of prayer with me that you've had. So please feel free to email me at carolyn@letstalkprayer.com. Thank you.